I don't think he saw himself as being a bad guy. I think he saw himself as setting a standard for the company and for work ethic that was important. And he was very clear, by the way, with a lot of employees. He was very clear with everyone he hired. You are going to work harder than you've ever worked, but this is going to be a meaningful thing that you're a part of. You don't have to sign up for that, right? Like nobody has a gun to anyone's head. It is if you are signing up, know full well what you're signing up for, which is not a normal working life, right? And I think there are people who see that as a fair exchange, right? Uh, Basically, like it's kind of like if you are willing to give this much of yourself to a thing, the thing could end up being very valuable. It could end up being an incredible professional experience, and you could make a lot of money doing it. Are those guarantees? No. But one guarantee is that you're going to have to work really, really hard to make that happen. I don't think that's, by the way, a trade that everybody should make. Like I'm in writing this book, I'm not sort of saying that like, oh, everybody should join a startup. If you're a certain kind of person, it's probably a great atmosphere for you. And if you're a different kind of person, it's probably a terrible atmosphere for you. But he at least was honest with people about what the atmosphere would require.
Hmm. Yeah, because there was also this part in your book where Leckwin was talking about that because there was like this need for engineers and there were so many companies wanting them, that it was really hard to get them because it was so attractive for them to work at Google. You get paid 100K a year and whatever. But in order to motivate them, that was like the key point. It's like, here, you're going to work harder than ever. It's going to get dirty. And also, you're not just a pawn in this really big game. You're actually someone, you're a key player in this small startup that could eventually maybe even change the world. So let's like dive into that hiring process to find those engineers and like really convince them to even like want to work at a startup like that. Um, are there any similarities in the way X and Convinity hired people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that a few things. One is they are both looking for like people who are willing to essentially sacrifice themselves for the company, right? Like you're really when you're Max Levchin or you're Elon Musk, you in a way, what I discovered is that like they know what their standards are, right? They can kind of tell who's going to be a slacker and who's not. Some of this is probably just intuition, some of it is reps, some of it is whatever, but they have to know that you're just going to come in on the weekends and get work done, right? I would say the other thing is that they at the early part of the company, they have both companies. There's a little bit of a difficulty recruiting because they're competing against successful internet companies that have already gone public and other startups that have a lot of venture capital who can recruit. So in 1999, the dot-com bubble has not burst yet. And so there is basically the problem of you have a lot of engineering talent, but you have a lot of places that talent could go. And some of those places are places like Google and Yahoo that are established companies. And if you're somebody that's like, oh, I want money and stock options and these things, you can go there. And it's a little harder for a company that has no products, very small team, less budget to actually go and recruit people. That changes in late 2000 and 2001 because the dot-com bubble bursts and a lot of other companies are gone. And so now what happens is you have a lot of people who are laid off and they now Confinity, well, but by then what is called PayPal, PayPal has the ability to say, no, no, like we're going to be able to be a little bit choosier about the people that we bring on. One big difference between the two companies, Confinity does not have as much money as X.com does. So X.com has millions in the bank because of Elon and then because of the investment from Sequoia. So they have a little bit more room in terms of who they could recruit, how much they could pay. They can hire people with a little bit more experience. Confinity like truly has to like do a very guerrilla strategy of like finding friends and like finding people who are available, right? And like finding people who are like crazy enough to take a gamble on this thing. The other thing is remember, Elon, because of his success, is somebody that people look at him and they say, well, if I hitch my wagon to his star, I know that he knows how to get to success. He can take us from 0 to 1 to sale or 0 to 1 to IPO, right? Because he's done it. Max and Peter have no reputation within Silicon Valley. So it's not as though you join that company and you're like, oh, this Max Levchin guy, he's for sure going to be successful, right? Like you're really taking a little bit of a bigger gamble, which means that the people they had to recruit necessarily are factoring that gamble into their thinking about whether to join the company. Um, I would say the other thing that both companies do is the hiring methods are unconventional. Elon will take people out. There's this one story I recount in the book. He takes somebody out he asks this person to fly that day to meet him. They have dinner. They stay up until like late, like 2 o'clock in the morning talking. And then Elon looks at him and says, can you come in at 7 a.m. to get your offer letter? Right. And so he's like, that's how intense the recruiting is. Once he's found somebody he wants, he goes after them pretty aggressively. On the Confinity side, it is somewhat similar in that if they find somebody they're interested in, that person comes in for an interview, they actually have to interview with the whole team. So they make them talk to the entire team of people. It's like a day-long gauntlet of interviews, and then they make them an offer. And so, there's some like little tiny differences between the two, but in 1999 in particular, they're both facing some of the same challenges. The market for engineers is very hot. Engineers can command a premium, and you have to find the right person.
Mm-hmm. You wrote in your book, Max Lechvin kept repeating A's hire A's, B's hire C's, so the first B you hire takes the whole company down. How do you think both companies were able to recognize A's in the first place? Like, was it smartness they were looking for? Was it logical thinking? Like, what are like key points that they were looking for?
Yeah, and it's funny, he's actually, paraphrasing or quoting Steve Jobs there too. So Steve had a similar line. Yeah. And I think one thing is like he is an A. You know? So Max Levchin by all accounts and by his track record of success is a phenomenally successful engineer and a phenomenally brilliant business mind. And those two things are very rare. Um, so he knows an A, sort of in that way that like you can kind of sense when somebody is going to be kind of like you, and you're like, oh, we understand each other. I kind of get that you're probably built the way I am. So I think some of it is intuition. Like I do think that a lot of it, like it's like why did Peter and Max become friendly and then friends and then coworkers? Well, because I think both of them sort of said, oh, you're like a little bit like me. Like you love these things, you're very intense, you don't like to lose, you're very competitive, right? Um, and so there's a little bit of like almost like you're looking into a mirror when you meet somebody and you're like, okay, we understand each other, right? I think part of what they did is they just tried to find people who they would like when it came to engineers, Max would subject them to tests. He would actually have them solve puzzles and some computer science problems in the room when he was interviewing them as a way of seeing if this person is as good as advertised. There is only so far a resume can take you. And so there's this famous moment in the book where this guy comes in, he's got a math PhD, and he comes in for an interview. He comes very well recommended, very well regarded. He comes in, and Max throws a math problem at him. And the guy starts to solve it, and he starts writing on the wall, and he fills up this like whiteboard. And then he starts writing on like the glass wall of the doorway or something in the office. And the way Max described it, he said he got the right answer, but he had to basically design like a brand new calculus to find the answer. And so he says that was not somebody I was going to hire. And he said, in spite of him getting the right answer, the problem is that he took so long to get the right answer. And in the work we do in technology entrepreneurship, you need people who are efficient, not just effective. If it's going to take you that long to do something, we can't move at that speed. I need somebody who can get there much more quickly. And so that it's a very kind of specific anecdote, but it's revealing of some broader things they were looking for. They were looking for hackers, right? They were looking for hackers. They were looking for people who were okay with a good enough solution so that it solved the problem so they could get to the next problem. And that is part of, I think, in that organization being an A. It's that you are not looking for perfect. You're not looking for ideal. You are trying to solve the problem so you can get to the next problem.
Mm. And how were they able to keep those A's motivated to keep on working hard in the company? Was it equity? Was it more the culture?
I think it varies person to person. The way that motives can vary from person to person. I would say one thing about A's, at least that you learn in this company, is like they don't really need much of a push to keep working hard. Working hard is kind of their default, right? So like one of the things that somebody said to me when I was interviewing him is he said, a lot of us like if we didn't go to the office, we wouldn't know what else to do with our time. He's like, we just basically like went to the office because it was where we wanted to hang out anyway, and then we were going to work, right? And then we would play video games, and then we would keep working, and then we would play video games, and we keep working. And so he sort of made the point. He's like, this is what I was going to do in my free time anyway, so I may as well do it with these people that I like and this company that I'm building. Um, so there's a kind of curious quality of like with a lot of A's, you wouldn't need to tell them, hey, you need to work harder, right? Or you need to do more. I would say part of it is the team had so many talented people around. One person described it roughly like they said, like, if you looked at any given role, we had the best person for that job in that role. And that was really inspiring. It sort of inspired you to like really bring your best to work, right? Like you really knew you were like, wow, I am being judged by some of the smartest people I have ever met in my life. And that means something to me, right? Their judgment matters to me. I would say the other thing is there was a real crisis within the company about fixing the company's finances in the year 2000. So that your listeners have context, PayPal is very uncertain as a company for the entire early 4-year period of its existence. And so what you have is a company that launches an emailing money product, but kind of not neglects, but underestimates the degree to which launching a product that people use to send money is going to attract a lot of fraudsters. And so what they have in the year 2000 is a real crisis around fraud. They are burning, by some estimates, between $5 and $11 million per month on fraud, and they don't have a lot of runway to play with. And so when you're burning that kind of money, the company has all this urgency around like, we've got to fix the fraud problem. We've got to fix the fraud problem. And it helped then to motivate people to do their work because the company's future was on the line. And there is this real sense, if we don't fix this, we are all out of a job. And if we don't solve this, the company goes under and everybody will get laid off. Now that was not a big deal for some people. They knew they could like go find their way in the world. But for the people at the top, this was a big deal. It was like, oh, this company's going to fail if we don't fix this. So if you feel that way, if you feel that kind of pressure, you don't need to then be motivated to work hard. You're going to work hard just to keep the thing alive.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And like once you got like all these smart people, they're motivated and they want to make sure the company survives. How were they able to put them in the right spot or right team so you could get the most out of them? Like, did they work in big teams, small teams? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was actually very small teams. And so part of what they did is, and this wasn't, by the way, this wasn't perfect. This was a startup. So they were figuring out a lot of this stuff as they went along. There was no org chart. Things changed all the time. It was chaos, right? I mean, this was a really chaotic environment. And also, remember, this is 1999 and 2000. This is 25 years ago. And so you don't have the same systems, the same understanding of what it takes to do a startup. The whole idea of doing a startup was so much crazier back then than it is today. If you joined a startup today and you told your parents, I'm joining a technology startup, like in Berlin or New York or Austin or Miami or wherever, they'd say, okay, like that's great. Like it's like, it's a fairly well established thing. If you told somebody you were joining an internet company back then, it was still a bit of a crazy thing to do. The total market cap of these companies was still relatively low. There were still other places you could go to be employed that were a lot more stable, they're a lot more traditional. And so you have this situation though where like they do engineer the company at one point to focus on like very small teams. And so David Sachs, if I remember correctly, does this thing where he's like one graphic designer, one engineer, one product person. And if you work in these small teams, right, you can actually like finish a lot of stuff and get it done. It wasn't perfect by any means, but there were ways in which they tried to keep the teams that were working on specific things small so that they could just like finish them and get them done. But it's one of the things that actually David and Max both describe, which is as team size grows, the number of communications you have to have grows so much that it actually becomes inefficient for a company. And so you have to be very careful about how you manage growth and manage team structure, because what you'll end up with is essentially like as Max describes it, all these pairwise communications that actually chew into the ability to get things done and get things released. And so it's a very, by the way, this is like an old problem in computer science, is like, how do you add enough engineering talent that you can solve the problems you need without adding so much that you then just created new communications problems. And so they tried to keep the team size small. They tried to attack specific problems. I would say the other thing is at the company, people did move around a lot, right? They moved roles until like they found a place that they fit. It wasn't always perfect, right? But you had people who would one day be working on customer service, who another day would be working on something completely different, right? And there are people who are brought in to do X and they end up doing Y. And that's kind of the nature of doing a startup is that you come in expecting that like the job you do next month might be very different from the job you do today.
Mm. Yeah, I think it also attracts those type of people that even want that in the first place. Like young people
Right.
aren't even like completely sure what their interests are. Like some days I'll do customer service, other days I'll be graphic designer, other days I'll be an engineer, whatever. Like you're
Yep.
open for that, and I think that's
That's
why
right.
like the average age was probably quite low, right? Around the 20s, mid 20s.
Yeah, it was higher than people think. I mean, there were definitely some people in this group who were industry veterans. The board members were a little older. Even Elon and Peter were, I think Elon was in his like he was like 26 or 27. He was a little, he's in sort of for a little bit more seasoning. Peter was in his early 30s. So it wasn't all like 21-year-old hackers, but there were certainly a lot of people who were comfortable with uncertainty. And I do think that like you're more comfortable with uncertainty when you're younger, just because you have fewer obligations, you have fewer pressures on your time, right? You don't have children, you don't have a family. The people who are parents in this group, it was a very hard several years for them, because you have to manage the demands of a family against the demands of this crazy company that's where other people are going to work 7 days a week. So you always feel like you're you're not like somebody actually had this great anecdote. I don't even know if I put it in the book, but he said, one of the problems was that you felt like if you weren't at the office, you missed something that might have been said that like altered the shape of the company. And so you were always a little bit like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, how's this all going to work? And so that does lend itself to somebody who's a little bit more comfortable with that kind of uncertainty and chaos.